Hi there everybody and welcome back to my channel and welcome back to lesson 2 of my complete beginner's guide to crochet. Now you should have watched lesson 1. If you haven't done so yet, then do that first. The link will be in the description box down below, where I covered what you will need. I explained about the hooks and equipment. I explained about holding your hook and your yarn, how to put a slip knot on your hook, and how to chain. So I do highly recommend that you watch that video before you watch this one. So as I say, this is lesson 2, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to work along your chain using the UK stitch double crochet. Now I say UK stitch. In the UK and in the US, the stitches are exactly the same, but we call them a different name. So I'm from the UK, so I either use the UK terminology, and this is a double crochet. If you're going to use US terminology, this is single crochet. So each time I teach you a stitch, I will tell you the UK name and the US name. I know it's a little bit confusing. I don't really know why we call them different names. The stitches are exactly the same. So just as a recap, I'm from the UK, so I'll use UK terminology. So I'm going to teach you how to do UK double crochet. I will also at the end on this little swatch here, I will show you how to weave in your ends. So you will need to have a darning needle. Now this is a needle with a large eye there, big enough for yarn to go through. The end is quite blunt, so they're quite safe, ideal for using with yarn. So you'll need one of those if you want to weave in your ends. Now also in this lesson, again, I'm going to be using Starcraft Special DK in this colourway Pale Rose. Just for reference, if you'd like to know, this swatch that I did earlier is in Starcraft Special DK in the colourway Duck Egg. I'm also going to show you a tip later how to use these stitch markers. As before, I'm going to use my Clover Moor hook. The size is 4.5 millimeters, and as I said before in lesson 1, I tend to go up one size when demonstrating. Normally with a DK weight yarn, you'd use a 4 millimeter, but just so that my stitches are slightly larger than normal, I use a 4.5 millimeter. You'll also need a pair of scissors for your ends. So we're going to start by putting our slip knot on our hook, which you should have practiced in lesson 1, but I will go through this one more time. So this is how I do my slip knot. My tail end is at the front, my working yarn is at the back. So I'm going to wrap around those 2 fingers, pull my yarn across, then I'm going to go under with my hook, grab that yarn, pull it through, just gently take my fingers out, tighten that up, and I have my slip knot. Okay, so I'm going to hold that tail end out of the way. I'm going to hold my yarn how we've practiced. I'll go over that one more time. Bring the yarn towards you, point up, grab your work, which is a knot. Now, for this example, I want you to chain 11. Okay, so grab that yarn, pull through 1, grab the yarn, pull through 2, 3, 4, 5, keeping these nice and loose, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. So what you can see is we have chained 11 stitches. So I can show you with my needle here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. So you can see lovely stitches, just like the links of a chain. Now what we're going to do is we're going to work along this chain using our double crochet stitches. Now if I show you close up, we don't count this loop that is on our hook, so this loop here. We're going to work in the second chain from our hook. Okay, so hopefully you can see okay. This is the first chain from our hook. We're not going to work in this one. I'm going to explain about that when we get to the end. We're going to work in this second chain from our hook, which is this one here. Okay, so you can see our chains. There's a larger hole at the top, slightly smaller hole at the bottom. We're going to go in that loop at the top. So again, we don't count this loop that's on our hook. We're not going to work in this first chain. We're going to work in this second chain here, and I'm going to put in my first double crochet. So using your hook, you're going to push through that first chain. You're going to grab hold of that yarn. Okay, so if I show you that motion again, grab hold, literally coming from behind, grab hold. Then what I would suggest you do is turn your hook, so you're using it as a hook slightly downwards. You're going to pull it through that chain. Okay, then push those loops down slightly so you're keeping them nice and loose. So you have 2 loops on your hook. Now this is how I used to remember that this is double crochet. Then what we're going to do is grab that yarn again. Go round, grab it. This time we're going to turn our hook slightly towards us so that our yarn doesn't ping off. And then very slowly adjust your hold if you need to. Pull that yarn through both of those loops. And what we have made here is your first double crochet. That's your first crochet stitch. Now we need to do that with the second chain. Now what we have formed here though is this large hole. Now this is all part of our first double crochet, but instinct makes us want to work in that large hole. Just avoid that large hole and work in the next chain along. All will become clear, honestly. So avoid that large hole. We're going to go in the second chain, which is this one here. So I'm going to push my hook through, grab the yarn, just turn your hook slightly so that the yarn won't ping off, and pull through that chain. Again, I'm just going to push those down a little bit to keep them nice and loose. You have 2 loops on your hook. Then you're going to grab your yarn, turn your hook so that it doesn't ping off, and pull your yarn just gently through those 2 loops. There we have done another stitch. Again, you can see we have a large hole here, but this is all part of our double crochet. So we need to move to the next chain. Okay. So again, avoiding this large hole, we're going to go in the next chain. So we're going to push our hook through, grab that yarn and just twist your hook down so that it doesn't ping off. Pull it through that chain. Again, I tend to push them down to keep those loops nice and loose. You're going to grab your yarn again, just twisting the hook so that this yarn doesn't ping off. Pull through both of those loops. And we have done our third double crochet. Now that's how we're going to carry along all of this chain. So again, just the way that we're holding it, we've got this big hole. This is all part of that third double crochet. Now instinct makes us want to work in there, but just ignore instinct for the moment. In a moment I will lay this out and I will show you how this is actually part of that double crochet. This is the next chain that we'll be working in. So we're going to push through, grab that yarn and pull through. So we have 2 loops on our hook. Grab the yarn and pull through both of those loops. When you actually lay that down and straighten it out, you can see those large holes just disappear and become part of the stitch. Obviously, the more you practice, the more you'll get to know exactly where to put your hook. But again, I'm going to pick my work up. Now you can see, so that large hole is actually part of the stitch. So you're not working in there, you're working in the next chain along. So again, push through, grab that yarn, pull through that chain. So I have 2 loops on my hook. Then I'm going to grab my yarn, pull through both loops. I have another double crochet. So ignoring that larger hole, go to the next chain along, push through, grab that yarn, pull it through that chain. So you have 2 loops on your hook. Grab that yarn, pull through 2 loops. Now I know I have another. If I get my needle, 1, 2, 3, 4 to work along until I get to the end of our chain. So it's push through, grab the yarn, pull it through that chain. So I have 2 loops on my hook. Grab the yarn, pull through those 2 loops. On to the next one, avoiding that larger hole. Push through, grab the yarn, pull through, grab the yarn, pull through 2. This is the next chain. Push through, grab the yarn, pull it through that chain. So I have 2 loops on my hook. Grab the yarn, pull through those 2 loops. Now I just have 1 more chain left to work in. So I'm going to push through, grab the yarn, pull it through that chain. So I have 2 loops on my hook. Remember each time to push those loops down just to keep them nice and loose. Grab that yarn, pull through both of those loops. You can then just tighten where we originally had our knot. And if I lay that down, we have come to the end of our row 1. So once we've got to the end of our first row, I'm just going to take my hook out so that you can see the tops of my stitches. So if you just turn your work and look down on those stitches that we've just done, you can see these lovely V's going all the way along. Now, if you remember, I asked you to chain 11 to start with. We missed out the first chain coming back, so we should have created 10 stitches. So I should be able to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 of those V's at the top. Now, when we go along and do our second row, we're going to be working under both parts of these V's. So if you see, when we put our hook in, when we're working along row 2, and then each row now going on until we finished our project, we're going to be working in the tops of these stitches. We're going to be putting our hook under both of those loops of that V. Okay, but I will show you that again when we turn. So if I just put my hook back in. Now, for double crochet, before we turn our work, we need to do what's called a turning chain. So this just adds height to our work. If we forget to put our turning chain in, our work is just going to get smaller and smaller. So before we turn, we do a turning chain. So it's literally just one chain. So we're going to grab our yarn, pull through that loop that's on our hook, and we have done our turning chain. Then we're going to flip our work, and then we're going to work all the way along. So again, can you see the tops of those stitches, these lovely V's? So you've got a V there, a V here. So we have to remember this chain here was our turning chain. We don't want to work in that. So if I look down, this is the first stitch that we want to work in. We want to go under both loops. So can you see I'm going under both of those loops? And that's how we double crochet now and for the rest of our project. So here we go with row 2. Ignoring this turning chain, we're going to work in our first V. We're going to push our hook through, grab that yarn and pull it through the whole of that V. So again, we have 2 loops on our hook. Make sure they're nice and loose. Grab the yarn, pull through those 2 loops. Again, we've made a double crochet, so you can see we have that larger hole. Turn your work towards you, locate your second V, so ignoring that larger hole, locate your second V, push through both loops of that V, grab your yarn, pull it through the whole of that V. So I have, again, 2 loops on my hook. Grab the yarn, pull through those 2 loops. That's our second double crochet. Again, turn your work towards you. Here is your next V. So we're going to push through, grab your yarn, pull through the whole of that V. So I have 2 loops on our hook, grab the yarn, pull through 2 loops. Again, look down on your work. I can see this next V. Push through the whole of that V, grab your yarn, pull through that V. I've got 2 loops on my hook, grab the yarn, pull through 2. Again, if I just literally take my hook out for the moment, just to show you these stitches when you look down on your work are making another row of V's. So I can tell that I have done 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches so far. Okay, so I have another 6 to go. So again, turn your work towards you, locate that next V, push through both loops of that V, grab the yarn, pull through so you have 1, 2 loops on your hook, grab that yarn, pull through 2. Here's my next V going along, push through, grab the yarn, pull through that V. I've got 2 loops, grab the yarn, pull through 2. The next V is here, so I'm going to push through, grab the yarn, pull through that V, so I have 1, 2 loops, grab the yarn, pull through 2. Again, keep looking down on your work. Here's my next V here. I'm going to push through, grab the yarn, pull through, grab the yarn, pull through 2. Now I know I have 1 V and 2 V, so I've got 2 stitches left. Very often the last one will look a little bit smaller, so it's handy if you can just keep count so you know you've got to work in 10 stitches. So here's the next V, push through, grab that yarn, pull through, so I have 2 loops, grab the yarn, pull through 2. Now I know I have 1 more to do. Sometimes this is a smaller stitch, sometimes it pays to get hold of your darning needle. Just poke that through first, and perhaps you could make that stitch a bit bigger if it needs it. So that last stitch, we're just going to push through that V, grab the yarn, pull through, so I've got two loops, grab the yarn and pull through 2. So again, I'm just going to lay my work down and I've finished row 2. Now I can just double check and go back and count those stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So let's do another row. So before we turn, we need a turning chain. So literally we're just going to do 1 chain. So grab that yarn and pull it through. We have our turning chain. Then we're going to flip our work. We're going to look down on our work. So this is our turning chain. Don't be working in this chain here. We're going to be working in this first V. So you're going to go push your hook through that V, grab the yarn, pull through. So I have 1, 2 loops on my hook. Grab the yarn, pull through 2. Again, looking down on my work. Here is the next V here, so we're going to work through there. Grab the yarn, pull it through, so I have 2 loops. Grab the yarn, pull through 2. Again, I'm looking down on my work. Here's my next V. I'm going to push through, grab the yarn, pull through, grab the yarn, pull through 2. Again, keep looking down and locating that next V. Grab the yarn, pull it through, grab the yarn, pull through 2. Now this is what we're going to do all the way along. So just keep remembering, look down on your work, locate that next V, grab the yarn, pull it through the whole of that V, grab the yarn, pull through 2. Again, you just need to keep it nice and loose. You don't want this to be too tight, otherwise you're going to struggle. And as I say, if I show you in this V, pull through, keep pushing those loops down so you're keeping them nice and loose. You're going to be working along each row. Each row is going to consist of 10 stitches. So I just take my hook out when I get to the end of the row. You don't have to if you're worried about it coming apart. So after each row, I'm just going to look down on my work and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 stitches. Now we have to remember after each row, so I've now finished row 3, before we turn we need to chain 1. That just gives us some height. Then we're going to flip our work. We're going to remember we've just chained 1. We're going to ignore that chain. We're going to look down, find our first V, and then we're going to start another row. So just keep working your rows using these double crochets. Just make yourself nice and comfortable. Don't worry if yours isn't perfect at all. If you lose the odd stitch, it's not the end of the world. What we just want to concentrate on at the moment is getting that motion, making sure that we're going through both loops of those V's and we're forming those stitches correctly. To be honest, everybody loses or gains the odd stitch or 2 to start with. It's just making sure also at the end, before you turn, you remember to chain 1 up. Now I suggest you practice a few rows and then I will in a moment just show you a tip using our stitch markers, how to help you keep a track of those ends. Now I've got to the end of another row. Now some people do really struggle identifying the first and the last stitch in each row. So I'm just going to give you a little tip. You can use your stitch markers. Now, if you don't have stitch markers, you could use a safety pin. It's anything that you can put through the top of a stitch and it'll just stay in place. So I have finished my last stitch of this row. What I'm going to do is, before I do my chain 1 up, I'm just going to pop this stitch marker in the top of that stitch. So I'm going to go under both of those loops of that V. Okay. Now I'm going to chain 1. And then when I turn to start my next row, I have no worries at all of where I'm going to put my first stitch because I have marked it. Okay, so just take that stitch marker out, leave your nails just there as a guide. This is where my next row begins. So I'm looking down, I've got that V and I'm going to start by putting my first double crochet stitch in there. Then what I tend to do is the next stitch as well. Okay, so I'm going through that V and I'm working that stitch. then I will mark the first stitch. So I'm going to take my hook out. That's the V I've just done. That's the first V, okay? So again, I'm going to mark that by putting my stitch marker through both of those loops of the V. I'm going to put my hook back in, and I'm just going to leave that stitch marker there for now, and I'm going to work along the rest of this row, working all along those V's. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, my yarn's caught. 9, and the last one, 10. Okay. Now I'm going to take another stitch marker and put it in the top of that last stitch, so in both loops of that V that I've just created. Okay, so in effect I have marked the first and the last stitch of that row. Now I'm going to turn, so I'm going to do a turning chain. Now I know exactly where I need to put my hook because I've marked it. Take that stitch marker out, put your first stitch in. Now I tend to do 2 just because this is quite loose here, but you could mark that one straight away. But I'm going to do 2 stitches, so I'm going to go to the next one. And then I'm just going to mark, sometimes have to pull these out, that first stitch again. So that's the V I've just done, that's my first stitch here. So I'm going to pop a stitch marker in, some more yarn, and I'm going to work back along this row, so working in those V's all the way along. You can see that I know exactly where my last stitch is because I marked it. Okay, and when I turn here and go back, I'll know exactly where that last stitch is as well because I've marked it. Now I know this can be a little bit of a faff, but if you are struggling to work out where your first and last stitches are, just whilst you're learning, it's just a little tip. Okay. Oops. Mind that stitch marker out the way, don't crochet into it. So you can see I'm definitely at the last stitch because I marked it the last time. So I just take my stitch marker out. Then I can work in that last stitch. Okay, and then I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, work in that first V. I work in the second one as well. I can just go ahead and mark that first V. And then I'm just going to carry on and so on and so on. It's just a little bit of a tip if you do struggle to see where the end and the beginning of your rows are. So just continue along, going to and fro, to and fro. You may want to use the stitch markers, you may not, but you just want to work up a little swatch, about 12 rows. It will be about perfect. Then I'm going to show you how to fasten off, and then on this swatch here I'm going to show you how to weave in your ends. So when you've gone to and fro a few times and you have your own little swatch. Now obviously don't be alarmed if you haven't got edges like mine. I've been crocheting for some time. The first time I crocheted a little swatch it looked most peculiar. But just remember, we're just practicing the motion, we're just practicing our stitches. You're going to get better and better as we go on. But now, once you've come to the end, all you need to do is just fasten off. And this is how we do this. It's quite easy. We're just going to chain one. So grab the yarn, pull through. Now, don't take your hook out. All you're going to do is cut your yarn a reasonable about 6 inches end, and then take your hook and then just keep pulling, and that will come through. Cinch that knot down, and that works as a slip knot in reverse, so that will fasten it off. So as this slip knot fastened on, this slip knot will fasten off. Okay, so there is your first little swatch. Now, as I say, yours is unlikely to look quite as neat as this one, but do not worry, practice makes perfect. So all I can suggest that you do is just keep re-watching the video over and over again, keep on practicing before you go on to lesson 3. But before then, I'm just going to, on this swatch here, I'm going to show you how we sew in our ends. So this will be the same for all of the ends that you have. So you're just going to take your darning needle. I tend to thread my darning needle. I tend to fold my yarn over. Okay. And then just thread that point through rather than trying to thread the end of the yarn through, because most probably you can see it's a little bit frayed like mine, so it's just easier to do it that way. And then all we're going to do, I tend to weave 3 ways, so I tend to use the stitches one way, this way, then another way. It just means that when your work is pulled or tugged about, the ends shouldn't then come out. So I tend to flip my work using the backs of these stitches. So if I show you, I just go up and down, say 4 or 5 stitches along. And then just pull. Don't pull it too tight, otherwise you're going to distort. You're going to pull that corner in. You don't want to do that. So I've woven those ends in one way. I'm going to go back upon myself using those stitches. I'm going to pull through that way. And then, as I say, I like to use the rule of 3 and then go back on myself for a 3rd time. I just find that it makes those ends stay in nice and securely. So again, don't pull too tight. So don't worry about seeing these ends. Nobody else is going to see these at all. So take your needle out, grab your scissors. Now you're going to want to cut as close to your work as you dare, but don't snip your work. The worst thing you can do now is snip a hole. There you go. Turn that over. And there you have your double crochet. So a huge well done. Keep practicing, and come back to me in lesson 3. In lesson 3, I'm going to be showing you how to do the UK trebles and the UK half treble stitches, and then once you finished lesson 3 you will be ready to go on to small projects. Maybe you can start you can follow my tutorial for a granny square. You could make yourself up a set of these fabulous face scrubbies where I show you how to work in the round. But in the meantime, just keep practicing, and I'll see you here for lesson 3.